Okay, so anyway, um, it's been a while since we've actually seen each other, or at least I feel like it's been a long time. It's been 2 weeks, which it's actually the last time we get a break until Thanksgiving. So how was everyone's Labor Day? How was it? How was your Labor Day? Wow, based on the response, it was speechless. Oh, okay. One person went to Niagara Falls. That's cool. All right. Oh,
Yeah,
and
it's
by
good
the way,
seeing you.
Edgar worked. Oh, Niagara Falls was awesome. That's epic, actually. That's cool. Deborah stayed home. Yeah, I miss going out. Yeah, I think, you know, we all miss it to a certain degree, even though, you can go out, but maybe some of us are more hesitant to do so, because believe it or not, there's still this thing called a virus going around. It's still out there. We kind of act like it's not, like we've passed it, but we're really not. So, Christopher stayed home and he watched movies. Cool. Yeah, that sounds like my weekend too. Okay. Well, it was also nice reading the forum posts. Some people's is post for the forum about writing a little bit about yourself was a little bit uh a little bit more brief, like a little bit too brief than I would have preferred. Like one person literally wrote, "I like sleeping." Okay, cool. That explains nothing about you besides you like sleeping. We all like sleeping. But still, it was nice to read your posts, and hopefully, if we meet in person, I'll get to know you guys a little bit better. I just feel like it's important to create some kind of community amongst each other, even if we have to end up doing it through a computer, because eventually I will put you guys into groups and you're going to have to do assignments as a group. And I think the way I'm going to do it is through Blackboard Collaborate, I believe, or just assigning okay, you're with Selena. Selena is going to be with Andrew, Elijah, and Samantha, and that's your group. Go ahead and do this assignment. You know, either way, though, I think it's cool if we, get to know each other to a certain degree. It was also nice reading your letters as well. Um, I believe there was 14 letters that people posted. So obviously some people have to get on board and post theirs. These shorter writing assignments, altogether they're going to equal 10% of your overall grade. So if you don't do them, that's, obviously points you're leaving on the board. um, that could come back and affect your overall grade when things are all said and done. So, um, right. And we're going to actually look at a few letters. And when we do, you know, I'm going to actually be looking at grammar a little bit. And yeah, everyone here, their grammar wasn't wonderful. It wasn't perfect. Everyone made a few grammatical mistakes. So, if I point out like, let's say, I don't know, Sydney's letter, right? Um, and I point out a grammatical error in that, it's okay. We all make grammatical errors when we're writing something, but I'm going to teach you ways to avoid grammatical mistakes. So um, don't feel embarrassed, right? If I point at your letter and say, "Oh, look, you, I don't know, missed a word in this sentence, or over here could have had a comma." You know, everyone made mistakes. As I said, everyone, probably you and 10 other students, would make the same mistake. And I believe that good grammar is extremely important, besides organization and clarity and other things like that. And yes, one student is asking, was it due today? And yes, it was due today. So if you haven't done it yet, please do it as soon as you could. Next week, I want the first draft of the personal narrative due. So if you don't submit the letter assignment today, that means you got 2 assignments to do for next week. So that's even more work you got to do, you know, and I would hate to be in that. Plus, you had 2 weeks to do this assignment. Um, and I know people had problems with flooding. How many people here actually had issues because of Hurricane Ida? Anyone? No one? Okay, well, great, wonderful. Yeah, okay. Some people did. Okay, yeah. Um, Actually, one of my colleagues, she lost power, so she wasn't even able to teach her class. So, she had to delay one of her classes because she lost power. Um, so anyway, I understand, like, some people says maybe their whole apartment got flooded, right? And if you were one of those people, you could let me know and we'll figure something out. We could figure out a way for you to still be able to do the assignment or assignments. Um, are there any questions or concerns before we really dive into things? Anyone? No? Okay. How many people read Catherine Rampell's A Generation of Slackers? Not so much. 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. Yeah, one of the great things about this reading is that it is available online. So even if you don't have the book yet, you could still find it on the internet. The New York Times actually, on their website, they have the reading. So if you haven't read it yet, obviously, and let's say you're still waiting for the book or whatever, still, you go ahead and read A Generation of Slackers, not so much. And for some people, it was actually a bit of an eye opener based on your letters. It was some people were like, "Oh wow, I didn't think of that." And I do think it's partially because even in the reading itself, it points out that there have been polls taken where, yeah, today's generation does feel like they're actually lazier than their parents' generation, you know. And it's interesting because how do you measure laziness, right? Because you could say, well, yeah, maybe we are lazier than the previous generation, but does that actually make us lazy? Or is it just we do things differently, or it's just easier to do certain things differently than in the past? Um, so I think the first thing we're going to do is actually take a look at the reading. If you have the book, you could obviously, open and turn to page 383. Or if you want to go online and look it up, you could do that too. Um, hold on, I actually have the reading. Hold on, let me find it right here. So that's on the New York Times. That's the reading. Generation of Slackers, Not So Much by Catherine Rampell. The first thing you want to do, because there is a certain way, like whenever I give you a required reading to do, there's reading it and then there's closely reading it, right? And whenever you read something, anything for a class, the best thing to do, in my opinion, is to read it first without taking any notes. And then you go back and you reread it again, and you read it more slowly and through a much more analytical lens. And you also look at other things like, are there, like, what is the genre, right? We talked a little bit about genres, how letter writing is a genre. Well, newspaper writing is a genre in of itself, and there's even subgenres when it comes to newspaper writing. This is an op-ed, this is an editorial. This is not somebody just reporting a hurricane destroyed 4 houses the other day. No, this is someone who's done research and is trying to prove some kind of points through that research, and they're publishing that research in the op-ed section of a newspaper. And sometimes you'll read that it's a blog post, for example. And blogging, we'll talk about that more later, but blogging, it's its own separate thing. You also have to look at the dates that it was published, right? Back in 2011, that was 11 years ago. That was a long time ago. So a lot of what this person's saying might apply to what happened. It was actually 10 years ago. We're still in 2021. 10 years ago, what that person's saying might be outdated today to a certain, I think it still applies to today, to be honest with you, but still, that's something you have to take into account anytime you read anything, is the dates, how it was published, where it was published, et cetera, et cetera. Hold on, just, okay. So now, if you have the book, they have this whole introductory paragraph that's not included here. If you have the book, it would actually be wise to read that introductory paragraph, because it does give some background information to who Catherine Rampell is. It says that she writes a blog for the New York Times. She writes in the economy blog for the New York Times. So she's applying this and her research through the lens of an economic analyst. And that's how she partially came up with her conclusions, purely through an economic stance, which could be different than maybe how, let's say, your parents views this generation, right? Your parents don't look at things through an economic lens. They look at it through a very different lens. And that's why maybe they think you guys are lazy. Meanwhile, Rampell is like, how could they be lazy if they are contributing to the economy? Or so many of them are graduating from college and are getting degrees and getting in these, high, white collar, high intelligence, in quotes, white collar jobs, for example. So, and I think we all, like, even me, like my parents would say that my generation, we were lazy. And when I was growing up, I didn't have a cell phone, and yet, according to them, I was lazy, and now people my age might think you're lazy. And actually, somebody in their letter actually pointed that out, that every generation will think that the previous generation was lazy. And that just inspired me to think of like that gif of Steve Carell going, thank you, like that. Like finally somebody pointed that out. Okay, so now when you're reading something, now, if you have the book, it's obviously easier to do this. But if you have the book, it's easier to, highlight or underline things or draw circles or stars, right? Or even write in the margins. So, if you don't have the book, then a smart thing to do would be to print out the article as well. Now I know ink and paper that costs money too, but my old school self, I would print it out. I know that there are other applications and tools you could use to write notes on a document, but annotating is very wise to do. So the first paragraph goes, you think there would be a little sympathy this month. College graduates are jumping into the job market only to land on their parents' couches. The unemployment rate for 16 and 24-year-olds is a whooping 17.6%. And one theory as to why that's the case is because everybody's getting college degrees these days. So, a college degree is not a guarantee of anything. And that's why the unemployment rate is so much. And also, I think young people are encouraged not to take blue collar jobs. That if you graduate college, you're expected to not be working at, let's say, being a waitress at a restaurant anymore. When you graduate, you're expected to be in the field that you wanted to be in, that you had that degree while you went for that specific degree. But there's only so many jobs to hand out, and let's say a psychology degree, for example, or a history degree. Okay, now one sentence that I did underline when I was reading it was Generation Y or millennials, the Facebook generation, or whatever you want to call today's cohort of young people, which I guess we wouldn't call this generation the Facebook generation. Like Facebook, that's what I used when I was your age. I guess you guys use, I don't know, Instagram and I don't know, what's the cool app, social media app that you guys use these days? TikTok. TikTok is certainly one of them. What else? Is there another one? Snapchat, right? Okay, so I guess you guys would be called the TikTokers or the Snappies.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Please don't say that.
Don't say that. Uh-oh. All right, you TikTokers, you snappy chatties. I don't stand by that reference. Okay, anyway, you guys, which I still think this might apply to you. I don't know, she could have called us the Facebookies or Faceheads, whatever. Anyway. They feel entitled and are coddled, disrespectful, narcissistic, and impatient.
Are you listening to TikTok right now? Who is that?
Me? I don't know. Somebody is.
Oh,
I'm not. I don't have a TikTok.
Someone's unmuted.
But yeah, someone's unmuted. Okay. I think they unmuted. They muted. Anyway. No, I don't have a TikTok. I'm old. I got a Facebook. That's what I'm used to. Not you younglings and your TikToking. I'm not used to that yet.
Yikes.
Anyway. Yeah, so they feel you guys, according to this You're entitled, you're coddled, you're disrespectful, you're narcissistic and impatient. I don't know. Do you guys feel that way? Do you feel like you're entitled?
Maybe a little.
Maybe a little. Do you feel that Andrew says not at all. You're not coddled. I mean, I've actually taught another article called "Is Google Making Us Stupid?" Right? Like, is Google like, because we use the term these days, oh, just Google it. Meanwhile, our parents, when they, let's say, had to cook and bake an apple pie, and they didn't know how to, they would either have to take a recipe from somebody else, or they would have to have a cookbook, right? Today, we just Google it, or we YouTube a video of somebody making it, right? So I don't know. Maybe you are coddled to a certain degree. Disrespectful. I don't know.
I think the disrespectful is kind of half and half because personally with me, what I feel like it is that this generation, we don't put up a lot of stuff with a lot of stuff that the older generation used to put up with. So I feel like that's where the disconnect is, where they feel like we're being disrespectful, but it's more so the fact that we're not going to put up with the same thing that you put up with.
Okay. We're not going to put up with it. Why? Why won't you put up with it? What makes you no, but really though, I mean, why, like, is it because you don't have to? Right? Is that what you're saying? Like, we don't have
It could
to.
be,
Yeah.
it could be, and then sometimes it's like even with like certain situations, the way maybe a person in the older generation may have handled it, even though even might maybe for example maybe discrimination, they would have probably put up with it, but nowadays you have the cameras, the cell phones, or whatever the case is, so you're more than like stand up for yourself in certain situations, and so I feel like that's kind of where the disconnect is as well.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you don't put up with it because you don't have to, right? You know, I mean, like, if I told you to write a research essay, the first thing you're going to do is probably Google whatever it is you want to research, right? You're not going to, you're going to you're going to go the easiest path first, right? You're not going to say, okay, you know what, let me go to the library first, and then I'll go on Google. No. Why? Because you don't have to. You have the resources available to you on your cell phone, right? You know, which is why I honestly, when you read this article, and let's say you come across a word you don't know, you don't need a physical dictionary to look it up. You know, back in my day, we were actually, when I was a freshman, when I was one of you guys, the professor required us to buy the American Standard English dictionary, and we were required to bring it with us to class, every class, a physical dictionary, right? Today, I will not require you guys to bring a dictionary with you, because I know I could just ask, hey, John, look up, I don't know, this word, right? And John can be like, okay, I'll look up the word, right? You know, so in the little chat room that I have right here, that we have right here, Karina actually writes, it makes us, it actually making us smarter. We know everything this day. Wow, you guys know everything? That's awesome. I wish I knew everything. No, but we have the ability to know everything, right? Because we have these cell phones where you can look up anything, right? You know, it is just an endless sea of information. So that is true to a certain degree. Absolutely. Deborah writes, we just do things the modern way, but I would still consider us hardworking. Sure. Just because we do things differently doesn't mean we're not hardworking. We're still hardworking. We just do things different. which in the eyes of our parents who maybe don't really get it per se, they perceive it as laziness when it's not laziness at all. It's just different. Which, by the way, your parents' parents, so your grandparents, they probably said that your parents were lazy too, you know, and that's just a truth. You're going to say your kids are lazy. That's just how it is. I'm still waiting for the days where we get a computer implanted, like a little microchip implanted in our brains, where instead of having to go on Google and type in something with our fingers, we'll just think, oh, I want to look at pictures of puppies, and suddenly you'll see pictures of puppies like in front of your eyes. I'm waiting for that to happen. Yeah, Deborah writes, I imagine that with contact lenses. Google actually, they produced Google Lens at one point, and I thought that was going to blow up, but I guess not. It wasn't fashionable enough. But Apple Eyes, how crazy would that be, right? Apple Eyes. Tesla, yes. And you know what? I inherited another class from a different professor. And that class is all about technology. Like that's one of the main themes. And we're talking about robotics because Sydney writes, now Tesla's making robots. And yeah, we could talk about robots all day if you want. Well, there's people are writing in the chat room here. Andrew writes, not only that, but most of us will always have an answer to anything, no matter right or wrong. Yeah, I mean, we all want to be right? And let's say you're in your parents' shoes, right? You don't want to admit that, like, yeah, my generation's is the laziest generation ever. Like, you don't want to admit that. So you're going to just say, oh, no, my generation is wonderful. Yours is not. And say things like, when I was 16, I worked at McDonald's. But your 18-year-old self, you're still living at home. Therefore, you're lazier than me, right? Which we'll look at some people's letters and, they say, well, just because I'm at home still doesn't mean I'm lazy. Just because I'm not working in a grocery store doesn't mean I'm not doing other things that also require work, right? Okay, Sydney also writes, we just don't retain all the knowledge out there because we know it's at our fingertips. That's a good point. That is actually the point of, again, another article you could read called, Is Google Making Us Stupid? Right? Because he argues that in that article, the author argues that because it's easier to access information these days, that we are actually losing something. That if you go to a library, let's say, and that's how you access information, because there's actually physical work involved, that somehow translates to making us more intelligent because we're working harder to gain the knowledge. That if you work to gain knowledge, then that knowledge tends to actually stick more. Okay, Shane writes, I heard there won't be any jobs because the robots are about to take over soon. Everything is going to be technological soon. Well, I hope the robots don't rise up like, the Terminator or the Matrix. But apparently in Japan, in some McDonald's, you walk into the McDonald's, there are no employees. There's just, it's like a vending machine almost. You type in what you want, you put in your money, and then almost right after you put in your money, you get whatever is, like, it comes out like a vending machine. you know, and the crazy part is, you know how in America, when you walk into a McDonald's and, you know, the burger, like, let's say you order a Big Mac and the burger might be like the meat might be like almost falling out, and the cheese might not be in the middle, and the ketchup could be smeared like all over the wrapper. Well, in Japan, that doesn't happen. The burger looks exactly like the burgers that you see in the advertisements. You know, it just looks like a perfect burger. So what that implies is that and also because you don't have to deal with humans, you don't have to deal with people who, you know, would rather not be there. And also they don't screw up your order, you know, like we've all experienced this. You order a Big Mac, but you know, with no onions, let's say, and then you get a Big Mac with onions here in America. In in Japan, they don't make that mistake. You get it exactly as you want it, which is crazy, you know. And what that implies is that the technology is actually surpassing the humans to a certain degree. You know, I mean, it's not going to rise up yet. It's not there yet, and we're not like, who's seen the movie Wall-E here? Anyone? I'm sure some of you have. Yeah, and you know how in the movie Wall-E, all the humans are like fat and just sitting in chairs, and the robots, they're just doing everything, right? You know, we're not there yet. But if this generation, if you guys are lazy, I can't imagine how other people are going to be, how much more lazier they will be if 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 machines start to surpass us when it comes to certain things, yeah, and replacing us, right? You know, being able to do jobs better than us humans we could ever do so, you know. So that's definitely something to think about in the future, especially if you're interested in that sort of thing. Again, my other class that I'm teaching now, originally I wasn't teaching that class at all, but now I am. And the theme of that course is technology and how it could impact society. And yeah, that's definitely something to think about uh, as well for the future. Okay, but that's just two paragraphs that we talked about. But you know, I mean, do you feel like this generation is disrespectful? Are you guys disrespectful? Do you agree with that?
Honestly, I feel like every teenager is disrespectful, and I feel like a lot of people are pinning it on this generation solely because we have a voice now with social media and
Mm,
everything. And I feel like now that it's actually getting out there and we have a sense of entitlement because we can get our voices out there, I feel like it's more like, oh, you guys are just assholes, so to speak.
mm. Well, it's certainly easier today to be disrespectful. I'll say that, with social media for sure. You know, yeah, and social media is something we're going to be talking about a lot in a few weeks from now. You know, it's just, why do you think it's so easy to be disrespectful with social media? Karina writes in the chat room, you do not face people. Absolutely. Yeah, because we're hiding, you know, Gianna and Andrew both writes, because you're hiding behind a screen. Lila writes, yeah, it's the screen. It's the screen. It's this thing that I just shook right now. Um, you know, and also one of the other crazy things, you could create multiple profiles, right? You know, I could probably right now make a Twitter profile calling myself Kitty Cat 193, right? That would be my name. And the profile picture would be a kitten, right? And then I would just, and then I could just say anything and no one would know that it's me, Stefano Bartoloni, saying it. You know, you could hide, right? And not just behind a screen, you know, but again, you could just create a whole new personality. You could literally invent an artificial human being. And yeah, you don't have to face people either. You know, you can't punch somebody through a screen, you know? And I bet if these two people, like, let's say one person's saying a bunch of like bad things to somebody else, and then that person counters and, you know, in the replies says something, you know, something else terrible. And then these two people were to actually see each other in the real world, I guarantee you they would just say, apologize to each other and be like, hey man, sorry about X, Y, and Z, you know, and the other person would say, oh, it's all cool, you know, and just go about the rest of their day, right? And because you guys are the Facebook, Twitter, TikTok-y, Instagram-y generation, you guys are so much more familiar with social media than people older than myself, for example, you know. And I think that's why you get pinned with this disrespectful stereotype, but also, you know, no phones at the dinner table, right? You know, or, oh, put the phone down and actually, you know, have a physical conversation with somebody, or call me on the phone instead of text me. You know, I'm not saying that you guys definitely are more disrespectful than, you know, previous generations, but I'm just pointing out why people might think that, for sure. Impatient, right? Why would people think you're impatient? Anyone want to guess? Why do your parents think you're impatient? Which, you know, it's interesting actually. Somebody wrote, well, what about Karens? Aren't they the impatient ones? Right? But and if you don't know what a Karen is, that's pretty much middle-aged woman who they're impatient. But I think the reason why people would say that your generation is impatient is because you could get information so quickly these days that when you don't get that instant gratification, then you feel frustrated, right? Okay. Let's keep going. 3 in 4 Americans believe that today's youth are less virtuous and industrious than their elders. That is interesting. Virtuous. Why would you be less virtuous? Anyone want to guess? Right? I mean, we know what the word virtuous means, right?
I think it's mainly because of social media and that people portray themselves to be a certain way, and so that the people that are the onlookers, like for example, teenagers, people younger than us, they look at that and they're like, okay, these are what the young ladies and young men are doing out here, so I'm missing something. I have to get on board and do that. And I've actually said to myself a couple times, I was on TikTok the other day, and it was a prime example. This lady, she was in middle school, and her friends are basically telling her all these things that they were doing with their quote unquote boyfriends, and they weren't actually doing them. And she ended up doing them and got pregnant. So I feel like it's all about the how you look at things and what you're seeing on social media and how people portray themselves to be.
Um, yeah, I mean, I do think it's also because older people, they might have their own definitions of what makes somebody like a good person, let's say. And now we have our own, interpretations of what it means to actually be, a good person. Like for example, people are coming out, right? LGBTQ people are part of that community. It's actually easier to connect with other people, um, part of that same uh, uh, group, right? And but older people, we hear this all the time. Your parents, my parents say, "Oh, when I was growing up, I only know men and women, if you got this, then you're a boy. If you got that, then you're a girl, right?" Um, and so they're married to that concept, and anything not necessarily part of that concept is almost unnatural or even wrong. And I'm not saying all parents are like that, obviously, but that could be part of it. Like, oh wait, there can't possibly be anything except men and women, right? Or boys and girls. If you are something other than that, then that's just morally wrong, in their eyes. And also the industrious, like, that you guys are less industrious. I think again it has to do with what it means to be a hard worker, and that is working physically with your hands or studying more, right? And I think that there's this idea that if you work with your hands, that's harder to do than studying biology, for example, when the truth is both are actually hard. And yet, our society is still used to that notion of um, hard work equals physical work rather than, you know, studying on a computer, for example. And it's interesting because according to here, it says that 2/3 of millennials agree now that older generations were superior when it comes to moral values and work ethic, right? Moral values and work ethic, which, I mean, that again, according to people of my generation, that we're not hardworking, that our moral values are messed up. And maybe that's because we measure ourselves compared to our parents, and we almost feel a little guilty that we're at home, and we're, 18, 19 years old. So generational guilt, which is that in of itself could be a fascinating topic. Like, is guilt inherited? All right, so you skip along, and a paragraph that I circled during my own reading was, so is this the laziest generation? Is it the laziest generation? There are signs that its members benefit from lower standards. Benefit from lower standards. Maybe, in school today, it's easier to get an A than in the past. Like in the past, you had to work harder to get an A. I don't know. Or maybe these standards are measured by do you have a 9 to 5 job or not? Right? Technology has certainly made life easier, but may also be a generation gap. The way young adults work is simply different. Okay, kids these days are nothing new. It's worth remembering that to some extent, these accusations of laziness and narcissism in kids these days are nothing new. They've been levied against Generation X, baby boomers, and many generations before them. This is interesting. Even Aristotle and Plato were said to have expressed similar feelings about the slacker youth of their times, right? And what did Aristotle and Plato do in their days? They sat around and talked, you know, about philosophy. Not too many of them actually had like physical manual jobs. And yet even they said, oh yeah, the other generation is lazy and they're gonna ruin society. But this generation has had it easy in some ways, right? And we know this. They can access just about any resource, product, or service anywhere from a mere tap on a touch screen. Yeah, I mean, when I was in middle school, I heard that, oh yeah, suddenly, in a few years from now, there's going to be computers where you could take anywhere. You could walk around with these computers, and that just blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, when they come out with these things, it's going to be like we're in the future. And yet here we are with our cell phones, which if you think about it, the whole phone aspect of having a cell phone is really secondary to what it actually is, which is a mini computer. But also the typical grade point average in college rose to about 3.11 by the middle of the last decade, from 2.52 in the 1950s, according to a recent study by Stuart Rochester, professor emeritus at Duke, and Christopher Heery of Furman University. By the way, when you're doing a close reading, pointing out research that the author did to support their points is very important to do. When you see a statistic, that's very important to highlight, because those statistics only support their argument, right? And it's why research is important. And when you get into 151, you're going to go more in depth in that when it comes to research. But even at this level, research is huge. And yeah, I mean, this just supports that argument more, right? The fact that here's some hard evidence that supports whatever it is I'm trying to say. Why do you think that's the case, though? Why do you think GPAs rose today as opposed from the 1950s?
Technology.
Yeah, technology, right? That's definitely one possibility.
Resources.
Technology, resources, for sure. Gianna writes, because we have easier ways to get answers. I mean, another possibility is maybe because the standards are different, possibly. That maybe professors back in the day were just tougher on students, or students weren't as coddled back in the day than as they are today. But I would certainly say it's mostly technology. It it gives us less excuses not to understand something. Okay, and one other point, college students also spend fewer hours studying each week than their counterparts did in 1961, right? So your grade points are getting higher and yet you're studying less. It almost doesn't make sense, right? You would think the more you study, the better my grades will be. But now you don't have to work as hard, and yet your grades are getting better. And the only explanation I could think of is technology, right? Hold on, somebody trying to access the chat room. Hold on. Okay. Students heckle the teachers. Macian writes, and students heckle the teachers. I would like to know more about that. Like, are students putting more pressure on teachers to give them good grades? Right? I mean, because that is a possibility for sure. I mean, myself as a professor, I don't like to give out bad grades. I certainly don't want to give out bad grades. I do so sometimes as a motivational point, right? Like if I think you could do better, then that's going to reflect in your grade. But I certainly don't give a good grade simply because I feel bad for you. But maybe there are other professors like that are like, you know what? Let me help this student out. He wants to graduate with a 4.0. I'm not sure if he deserves a 4.0, but let me give him let me give him the grade anyway. I imagine there are some professors like that. I'm not, but it's a possibility for sure. Sydney writes, I feel like back then it was more one size fits all, and now we're more understanding. Sure, that's definitely a possibility that we feel like we feel sorry for you guys. We feel sorry that you got so much homework to do. So we try to be a little bit more accommodating. I think I mentioned this last time we actually had a class. My brother had a professor where he submitted his essay like 10 minutes late, and the professor fails him because it was late. That's an example of a hard ass. And maybe more professors were like that back in the day. But professors today are a little bit more like, oh, you submitted it 10 minutes late. That's okay. It was only 10 minutes. And that mentality of being more accommodating might reflect in your grades, right? I mean, I do believe in the notion, though, that if I'm going to make things more accommodating for you, then I respect your work to be better, but still, maybe it's easier to get good grades today because us professors, we feel sorry for you guys, which would imply that you're more coddled, but I digress. Okay. I'm gonna skip a little bit. Well, you know what? One of the things about the online article is that it has this picture. What's going on in this photo? Can someone describe the photo for me?
He's pole vaulting with while laying down.
Right. He's laying down on a couch, right? He has slippers on. and he's pole voting, pole vaulting.
Can I describe the picture?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the picture like represents him achieving goals while not putting that much effort in, because he's on his couch and he's looking like he's going over an obstacle without putting that much effort in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, he's doing no work at all, and yet he's still achieving something. Now, we don't know if he's going to end up hitting that pole. We don't. But that's what's implied, that he thinks I don't have to do anything and I could still fling over this. And yet, if you think about it, though, if you want to be really analytical about this, he actually is doing something, right? He's using his arms to bend the pole, which would fling him over. So, if you have like a glass half empty view on this, oh, he's lazy, he's laying on the couch. But if you have a glass half full view of this, you're like, well, yeah, he's doing things a little bit easier than maybe you would, but he's still doing some work. He's using his arms to bend the pole. He can't bend the pole if he doesn't use his arms, I don't know, maybe I'm looking too much into it, but I think that's the point of the photo. We're very meta here today. Yeah, I mean, you could write a whole essay maybe on this photo. Yeah, Raymond writes, working smarter, not harder.
It's 3:30.
Yeah, and I actually heard this quote one time, that this more intelligent I don't know how true it is, but the more intelligent you are, the more likely you are to seek easy ways of doing things, right? That like lazy people aren't stupid. They just find ways of doing things that doesn't require as much effort. Now, in my class, by the way, I reward hard work. Like if I see that the harder you're working, that will reflect in your grade, by the way. So I'm not really encouraging laziness. I'm just bringing the point that just because you find a lazy way of doing things doesn't necessarily mean you're dumb. You might be somehow smarter, actually. Deborah writes, comfortably reaching his goal. Well, yeah, that's literally what's implied here. Andrew writes, he is just so much better. He is able to pole vault while laying down on a couch. Yeah, sure. Now, your parents might say, though, oh, he doesn't deserve to pole vault over the couch because he didn't do the necessary Olympic level training to be able to do that. Which, if you think about it, is even more impressive that he's able to pole vault while sitting on a couch. I mean, think about it. That defies the laws of physics. But we're not being too technical here. Doing that on a couch seems harder than without a couch. Yes, Jan agrees with me. Doing that on a couch seems harder than without a couch. So there is so much going on in this simple little photo, little picture. Lazy people are the ones who invent technology, with a laughing face. That's what Karina writes. Yeah, I mean, maybe lazy people sit there and just think, what is the best way or the quickest way I could do something, right? And, we come up with something. I mean, I've heard and read that survival is the best motivator for innovation, but maybe it's laziness. Maybe. I don't know. We're being philosophical now. All right. So, and she also points out that you guys are more likely to get financial help. which could actually explain why college GPSs were actually lower back in the day, because people actually had to spend more time working full-time and going to school just so they could pay for school. All right, skipping around, between 1989 and 2006, the share of teenagers who were volunteering doubled, right? So you guys have to volunteer. I know who's in the you know what? I have a question. Back when I was in CSI, we had something called the Verrazano School, which was like something in between the Macaulay Honors and everyone else. It was like, yeah, another honors program, but not quite Macaulay Honors. Does anyone know if the Verrazano School still exists at CSI? Anyone? No one? Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But when I was a student, I was in this thing called the Verrazano School, and to be part of it, you actually had to do volunteer hours. And I was like, I'm not doing that. But in order to get scholarship money, some of us has to volunteer. And I don't know, I mean, how much your parents volunteered back in their day, but surely it wasn't a requirement, which actually, if you think about it, if it's a requirement to volunteer, then is it really volunteer? But anyway, that's a conversation for another day. No, the Verrazano School doesn't exist anymore. All right. It just didn't survive. Okay. But yeah, according to this, you're more likely to volunteer. So you're contributing to society to a certain degree, which is good, right? Boomers, members of Gen Y, for example, are significantly more likely than Gen Xers or boomers to say they are more productive working in teams than on their own, right? So I guess that's a good thing, right? If you're more likely to work as a team to accomplish a certain goal. To older workers, wanting help looks like laziness. To younger workers, the gains that come from teamwork has been learned from the collaborative nature of their childhood activities, which included social networks, crowdsourcing, even video games like World of Warcraft that emphasize cooperative rather than individual competition. So if your parents complain that you're playing too many video games, then you could honestly say, oh, I quote Mr. Tapscott, hey mom, these video games actually make me a good worker because I'm more cooperative. So I need to play more video games. In fact, you should buy me video games so I could be more cooperative. I don't know how true that is. I've actually never played World of Warcraft. But okay, maybe and I'm gonna test this when I put you guys into groups later this semester. Anyway, there's even more things about this article that we could go through. But I don't want to spend the whole class me talking and you listening to us talking about this article. So there are actually a lot of good things from it. If you haven't read it, please do so. But now I do want to take a look at some of your posts, some of your letters, right? Because a lot of you do write a lot of interesting things. Only about, it says 11 here. One person posted their letter somewhere else, and I think a couple of people directly emailed me their letters. But either way, If you haven't posted your letter, please, please, can't emphasize that enough. Please post it. All right, so, and again, don't be embarrassed by your grammar, all right? No one be embarrassed by their grammar. I'm actually gonna take this opportunity to actually help you guys out when it comes to grammar, right? I'm gonna read a few letters out loud, and we're gonna try to work together to actually, improve grammar. Okay. So again, Selena, don't be embarrassed. We're gonna be looking at a bunch of people's letters today. Okay. So, dear mom and dad, hold on, I'm sorry, I clicked on something. Okay, dear mom and dad. So this is a letter to her parents, right? Oh, if there is somebody out there though who wrote a super personal letter, you could tell me and maybe I'll just skip over it. Though I don't think anyone's letter was really that personal. So that's I mean, if you want to write a personal letter, that's fine, but you don't have to. So Selena writes to her parents, today, as opposed to glancing through my social media applications, I read an article by Catherine Rampell called "The Generation of Slackers, Not So Much." The name alone of this article has caught my attention because it made me question what generation she could have been referring to, along with the reasoning behind this claim. That is actually a good observation. Who is she referring to? Well, she's referring to people my age. So I think it can be applied to people your age as well. But still, to take that into account actually, is anybody seeing this? Oh, I just realized that I might not be sharing this with you guys. Hold on, let me bring that up. Okay, there it is. Right? Or is it? Oh yeah. Are we seeing that now?
Yes, we can see.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay. So, right, she brings up a good point that you should say to yourself anytime you read anything. What is the context, right? What is the context? Like who are we talking about here? And some little grammatical things that I would like to point out. This is the beginning of a paragraph, so you indent it, right? Whenever you start a paragraph, you indent it. It's that simple. Today, as opposed to glancing through my social media applications, right? So she points out that, oh, today I'm not going to go on Facebook or Twitter. I'm gonna do homework. I read an article by Catherine Rampell called "A Generation of Slackers, Not So Much." When you write a sentence, you want to double space. Like whenever you end a sentence, you want a double space in between sentences. Okay. And also, this is part of one sentence, so there really shouldn't be a double space in between those two words. Instead, whenever there's like a natural pause in a sentence that you're reading, there really should be like a comma there. Like, think about how this sounds when there is no comma. Today, as opposed to glancing through my social media applications, I read an article by Catherine Rampell called "A Generation of Slackers." It does sound a little bit like a run-on, right? But if I put a comma there, today, and actually, I think there should be a comma here too, right? Today, comma, as opposed to glancing through my social media applications, comma, I read an article by Catherine Rampell called "A Generation of Slackers, Not So Much," right? That that sounds better because I included the natural pauses. So that's when you would want to include commas. The name alone of this article had caught my attention because it made me question what generation she could have been referring to, along with the reasoning behind this claim. Typically, when you write something for this class, we want to use present tense. So I would actually delete the word had, right? Like, think about it, how it sounds. The name of this article had caught my attention versus the name of this article caught my attention, right? I mean, it's still past tense, but it certainly sounds better. Also, there's a little issue going on with the period here. You know, you don't need a space. And I think you could, like, again, in between sentences, you want a double space, you know, the period and the next sentence, you want to double space the two. Have a extra space in between. And before I keep going, a word of advice. Before you submit any writing for this class, and you want to make sure your grammar is as good as it possibly could be, read it out loud before you submit it. So, you know, what I'm doing now is I'm rereading her article out loud, so I catch all the grammatical errors. So the next time you write something for this class, before you submit it to me, you know, reread it out loud, because for whatever reason, and I don't know why this is the case, but it's certainly true. Your brain will catch all those things. Like, let's say you're missing a word, it'll catch it, right? Let's say she forgot to plug in the word of, right? The name alone, this article, you know, it obviously there's a word missing there. And when you read it out loud, you will read it as you wrote it. But if you read it on your own, like, let's say you don't read it out loud, you read it on your own, your brain might unintentionally plug in the word that's supposed to be there. And then you'll miss the fact that you don't have a word there. So, you know, again, let's say I read this same sentence, but not out loud, just on my own. My brain will read the name alone of this article, right? Meanwhile, of is not actually there, but my brain knows what word is supposed to be there, so it's going to plug it in. But again, if I read it out loud, I won't read of because it's not there. So that's just a word of advice. Anytime before you submit something for this class, even if I don't specifically say that grammar is important, I still, you know, it's still a good idea to reread it out loud and then submit it. You know, just so, you know, it, and also if the sentence you're writing doesn't really flow right, like, again, this sentence right here, as I read the article, I came to discover that she was discussing, right? I think, again, there should be a comma here, because when I read it with a comma, the sentence just has that natural sound to it. As I read the article, I came to discover that she was discussing your age group and my age group. And I think this sentence here could still use some help. But again, as I read the article, I came to discover that she was discussing your age group, right? Now, I still think I could improve this sentence a little bit. As I read the article, I came to discover that she was discussing your age group and my age group, contrasting the two in hardworking attitudes. I know what she's saying here, but I kind of want to improve the language that she's using. What could anyone think of another way I could write this? Anyone want to try to take a guess on how you would? Well, what is she saying here? Does anyone know? I mean, I think it's kind of self-explanatory, but I want to be on the same page. What is she saying in just that sentence? Come on, somebody, come on. Anyone? Anyone? Come on. I could wait till somebody is brave enough.
What's the question again?
Yeah, what is she trying to like? What is she saying in this sentence? Like in your own words, what is she saying in that sentence? Like as I read the article, I came to discover that she was discussing your age group and my age group, contrasting the two in hardworking attitudes. Well, okay.
Professor, I don't know if
Yes.
it's just me, but when
Yeah.
you're reading and what is shown on my computer is different.
Uh-huh. Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
me too. We only see like the beginning of the article.
Oh, wait, you still see the article?
No, I mean like the beginning of the
The beginning of this
what?
essay.
yeah.
I mean, do you see the sentence that I underlined?
No.
No. So what do you see?
Let's say you're pointing out to the words, but you what I'm seeing you pointing at, I have come to conclude that Gen Z is as lazy as older generations might think.
Yeah, I see the
Which
same
is the
thing.
beginning of the end of the first paragraph, what seems to me.
Huh. Huh. All right, hold on. Let me figure this out, because I said to myself, we're really quiet, and maybe that's why. All right. Hold on. Let me figure. Oh, you know what it is? I think I know what I did wrong. All right, I think I pressed the wrong essay, actually. Hold on, give me a second while I figure this out. Letter to your parents. Dear mom and dad. Where's this? Oh, okay. This was my bad. This was my bad. I pressed the wrong essay because I have a bunch of essays, on my screen right now, and I pressed the wrong one. All right, but a few things. All right, I'm gonna try to bring all this back to how it previously was before I did anything. Okay, so this is how this student's essay looked before I did any editorial changes. And by the way, do we see Dear Mom and Dad here?
Yes, all good
Yes.
Okay, all good. Again, that's my bad. All right, so first thing is first, right? What's the first mistake that we see without even reading anything?
The indentation.
Yeah, indentation, right? You know, it's a paragraph. It's the start of a paragraph, so you should indent, right? Um, Today, right, there should be a comma there because, again, as I said, it's like a natural pause. Today, as opposed to glancing through my social media applications. And in this particular draft, she just has a space here, you know, which shouldn't be there. It doesn't make sense why there's a space there. And she's missing another comma. She's almost like saying today and then to the side, as opposed to glancing through my social media applications. You know, you want to like add the commas to kind of separate the two thoughts.
Professor, can I ask you a question regarding indentation?
Sure.
How do we know? I know that we have to put that at the beginning of the paragraph, but sometimes you would read a letter and it would not have it. It is grammatically correct. You can see the paragraph starting every single time, but there are no indentation whatsoever. How do we know when to put them and when we don't need to put them? In what situations?
Well, that's actually a very interesting question. I mean, the rules for letter writing, really, if you think about it, like let's say you write a real letter to grandma, right? There really aren't any rules, but for the sake of clarity in this case, when you start a paragraph, you know, like think about it this way. If I'm a reader, right? And I don't that you don't indent, you never indent at the beginning of a paragraph, then I may not know you're beginning a new paragraph. So that's like my way of knowing, okay, this is a new paragraph. And how do you know when to start a new paragraph or not? Well, a paragraph is like literally one thought you have, right? Is one subject you have. You explain to the reader what that one subject is. And then the next paragraph is the next subject. And the sentences are like the bones that construct that paragraph. You know, so if you're done talking about one thing, that's his paragraph. Then you move on and you talk about something else in the next paragraph. That's why, like I think at the beginning of 2 weeks ago, I asked the students. No, I gave you guys an example that many freshman students think that a specific number of sentences equals a paragraph. That's not true. You know, it's really one paragraph equals one thought. So it doesn't matter how many sentences there is, as long as you're able to thoroughly explain that thought. And you might need one sentence, you might need 10 sentences. Does that make sense? Does that kind of sort of answer your question?
It's not that I'm trying to be disrespectful. I knew what the paragraph was. It's
Yeah.
I'm writing the letters most of the time, like the emails, not the physical letter, but the emails and stuff.
Oh, okay.
So for some reason, I'm not sure. Nobody used the indentations, and I wasn't sure if it is grammatically incorrect or like the people making the simple mistake of not using that. Just the spacing, you know, the spacing before the first word.
Well, usually in like
I see it in the books, but I don't see it in a simple email.
Well, you know, it's it's interesting. Most people, when they write emails, they don't follow like grammatical rules. I mean, they might, not to sound stupid or confusing, but you know, if you want to be super duper by the book grammatically correct and your email has multiple paragraphs, then I guess you should indent. But for the sake of more formal writing like this class, yeah, you know, if you're going to have multiple paragraphs, you should indent at the beginning of the paragraph. But if you're gonna like, let's say you're gonna send an email to me, let's say, I'm not gonna expect you to indent at the beginning of your email. You know, you could if you want, but you don't have to, you know. I mean, again, does that answer your question?
Yes, I
just wanna-
understand. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure I'm answering your question, right? Yeah, and it is true that in most letter writing, like in the real world, not from my class, but in the real world, there really aren't any rules when you write a letter, you know. But for the sake of my class, you know, I'm trying to get you to write in a grammatically correct way, because when it comes to your formal essays, that is going to be huge, right? That is going to be very important when it comes to the reflective narrative and the other two essays, formal essays. And I think, just again, for the sake of clarity, right? Grammar is important, because let's say you write poorly. I, as a reader, may not understand what it is you're trying to say. That's why grammar is huge. You know, and of course there are specific rules. Okay, so another mistake here is that she doesn't indent in between sentences, you know, and sometimes
It's 4 o'clock.
Okay, it's 4 o'clock. Okay, sometimes, you know, whether you're using Microsoft Word or Google, what's the other? I think there's also Pages or Google Docs. It'll point out to you when something's grammatically incorrect. It doesn't always do it, but sometimes it does. And again, as I already said, anytime you write something, it's smart to read it out loud before you press the send button or the submit button. Because again, you're going to catch most of the errors if you read it out loud. Reasoning behind this claim, and the name alone of this article caught my attention because it made me question what generation she could have been referring to, along with the reasoning behind this claim. Right. So this is a good observation. As I already mentioned, what is the context of the article? Is she talking about me or somebody else? Right. The period in the word claim, I mean, after the word claim has too many spaces. So again, in between sentences, you always want to double space, you know, press the space bar twice in between sentences. Even if you have a period or a question mark, exclamation mark. Right. Okay, now here we are getting to the question that I had before that no one could answer, probably because you were all looking at the wrong essay. Okay, as I read the article, comma, I came to as I read the article, comma, I came to discover that she was discussing your age group and my age group, contrasting the two in hardworking attitudes. Right now, in writing school, if I were like an editor and I was trying to edit your, I'm sorry, does someone else have a question? No? Okay, anyway. And I was, let's say, editing your paper, right? I would say that this sentence sounds too wordy. And by that, I mean, it almost has too many words, or the words, like the way it's organized, this sentence seems a bit too complicated than it has to be. And so I would say to you, you should reword this sentence. That's, because again, it sounds awkward when I read it. As I read the article, I came to discover that she was discussing your age group and my age group, contrasting the two in hardworking attitudes. Again, what she is saying here does make sense, and I know what she means, but it doesn't really flow that well. It sounds kind of awkward. And by the way, if you write something that kind of doesn't make sense to you, like after you read it out loud, you realize it doesn't make sense. If it doesn't make sense to you, it's not going to make sense to somebody else who's reading it. Right now, here it does make sense, but I still have some issues with it. How would you, meaning the class, somebody in the class, how would you reword this sentence? Okay, Gianna writes, I came to discover that she was evaluating both of our age groups. She was contrasting the two in reference to their hardworking attitudes. That is better. That is better. And one of the things that Gianna does here, I think you guys should look at the chat room and look at what Gianna wrote, because it is actually kind of good. She creates two separate sentences, right? A sentence is actually an independent thought in of itself, and sometimes, in order to explain a certain thought, you actually have to break a sentence down to where it's like you're having two thoughts now, that is able to explain whatever it is you're trying to say more easily. Again, let's read what Gianna wrote. I came to discover that she was evaluating both of our age groups. It's one thought, right? Thought number two, she was contrasting the two in reference of their hardworking attitudes. Yeah, I mean, that sounds better for sure. I still think this could be further improved, to be honest. Like this sentence right here, she was contrasting the two in reference to their hardworking attitudes. Give me a second, because I want everyone to see how I'm gonna edit this. So I'm gonna just share a new page real quick. Okay, so this is the second sentence of our edit of what was written in the letter. All right, she was contrasting the two. This is actually important. To what? To what? Right? You kind of want to be a bit specific. The two groups, right? The two groups she was contrasting the two groups in reference to their hardworking attitudes. I would write, she's contrasting the two groups based on their approach to hardworking, based on their approach to working hard. Again, that just sounds better. It's the same thing, right? But it is worded in a clearer way. So sometimes you might have to rewrite sentences multiple times in order for them to sound good, and to relay the points as best as possible. She was contrasting the two groups based on their approach to working hard, or based on their hardworking attitudes. No, well, based on their on their concepts of hard work, right? She was contrasting the two groups based on their concepts of hard work. Okay, I mean, I don't know if even that's perfect, but we're getting there, right? Yeah, or Gianna writes based on their work ethics. That too is good, is better. All right. All right, so Catherine discussed. Now I'm going to keep going through this letter, right? Catherine discussed her reasoning behind why she believes this generation is hardworking, and explains how this generation isn't full of slackers. A school of thought here. I mean, well, I usually like to write is not instead of isn't. I mean, again, this is a letter, so we don't have to be too formal when it comes to letter writing. But, I'm not a fan of isn't or ain'ts or aren't. I like how is not sounds better. And, again, double space in between sentences. She could have actually explained what is Catherine Rampell's reasoning, like be more detailed. Like, what is Catherine Rampell's reasoning as to why she actually believes young generations like you guys are actually hardworking? My reasoning for concurring with Catherine, concurring is a nice word, but I think agreeing is again simply better, right? My reason for agreeing, right? That just simply sounds better. My reason for agreeing with Catherine's perspective on this particular issue. And here I would actually say is because I don't think this student's opinion has changed, right? Like, she still has that opinion. So instead of saying was because, you're going to say is because, right? Is because my generation is held to a high academic standard. Again, the student still believes in that opinion. So again, you're going to use present tense in this sentence. And it's not like your generation is not held to those standards anymore. They still currently are. So you're going to say, is because my generation is held to a high academic standard. So, that's why the tense of whatever it is you're writing, that's why it's important. The best example I can provide the best example that I could think of, that's how I would think of, is having to pass. Yeah, again, this is another sentence that, could use a little rewording. The best example I can think of that I can think of is that the best example I could think of is that I could not graduate from high school without passing all 5 regents. Right? And that's a good point. And she could actually, yeah, and she does kind of mention here, unlike many other generations before mine, they didn't have to take a regents, right? That's what she's trying to say here. But my generation has to take a regent. And you can point out specifically, like having a regents, that requires me to study, and studying in of itself is hard work, right? And she could say that. She could be even more specific and say, listen, just because I'm not working with my hands, I'm still studying for 5 friggin' regents, Just because you didn't have to take a regents doesn't mean you're more hardworking than me. In fact, I had to do a part-time job, be in high school, and study for regents and volunteer so I could, I don't know, get money for school, get a scholarship money. Any other questions before I keep going? No? But yeah, those are just some examples on how to edit your writing, is simply by rereading out loud and think of certain things like what is the tense that I'm speaking in? Is there a natural pause in the sentence? Is there a word missing? And other things that we will look at when we go through other readings throughout the semester. It's almost 4:30, so that would be almost 2 hours, and I don't want to spend more than 2 hours. So we're close to wrapping up, but I do want to talk about next week's essay. So does anyone have questions about the first draft of your personal narrative?
I do. How do you grade them and where do you post it?
Okay, so I grade, well, first of all, it's a first draft. That won't even be graded. The first draft, it's gonna be 1 to 2, should I make it 2 pages? I would like you to write 2 pages, following MLA format, which I will actually show you in a few minutes. And you post it on Blackboard. So here's Blackboard. And you see here, essay assignments, right? In the purple to the side, you press the link that says personal narrative draft, like that. I say 2 to 3 pages here. That would be your final draft. Your final draft would be 2 to 3 pages. For now, I want 2 pages. Or a page and a half. I'll accept a page and a half also, but I don't want 1 paragraph. That's not enough, and you you will press create journal entry, right? And you see here attached files. You're gonna just press browse my computer, and you're gonna attach your essay. You know, I don't want you to type it right in the subject area, like right here. I don't want that, and I don't want you to copy and paste it in the subject area either, because that will change the format of your essay. You know, that will change the format of your essay, and I want your essay to look like how you intended it for it to look, if that makes any sense. Now, any other questions before I keep going? Will you specify on the essays the parts that need to be rewritten? Yes, I will. In fact, I will read everyone's essay and comment, you know, write comments on the essay, and point out things that need to be, you know, reworded, something that's grammatically incorrect. There should be there should be a new paragraph, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm gonna be editing your essays. So yes, that's part of the point of writing a draft first, is so we have an opportunity to rewrite our essay again, because I know that this first draft of this first essay is going to have a bunch of mistakes, and that's perfectly fine. You know, it's writing is a process. And this is how I kind of want you to format your essay. You're going to write your first, you know, to the left-hand corner here. And I'm going to actually post this on Blackboard, by the way, so you can use it as a reference later on. You're going to write your first and last name, Professor Stefano Bartoloni, the class, and the date in the left-hand corner. On the right-hand corner, you're going to write your last name and page number for every page. So as we notice here, like this person's last name is Angeli. They have Angeli 2, and then they have Angeli 3 and 4, et cetera, et cetera. I want you to do that. I want you to put your last name and page number on every page. So whether it's 1 page, 2 page, 3 page, 8 page, doesn't matter. Your first and page number is going to go there. Yeah, and in the first page, I call this a header. You know, that's the header. And if you don't have a header, I'm going to point it out, and I'm going to say missing header. You need and there isn't, as we notice here, it is double spaced, but it's not like triple or quadruple spaced in between header and the title, right? And yes, I require a title. And no, your title can't be Essay 1 or Personal Narrative 1. It has to have a title, and it has to have a bit of a original title. And then you, like, you know, again, in between title and the rest of the essay, that doesn't have a super big gap either. A lot of students, to take up more space and add more lines and make their essay look a little longer, they'll add like a bunch of spaces in between the title and their essay. You are not supposed to do that, though. Your essay is supposed to start, you know, pretty much right after the title. And then you have your essay, blah, 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 blah. And that's how I want you to format your essay, how the first page is supposed to look. Any questions?
Professor, are you gonna post this format?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Andrew writes, if we haven't written the first draft yet, should we use situation? Or is this only for the final draft? Use situation, like, I mean, I'm not sure, Andrew, what you're asking here in the chat room, but the MLA citation, I would like you to try to use it for every draft you write. You know, the first draft, second draft, and let's say you already wrote a draft for me and you didn't do this, that's fine. That's fine. But when it comes to these formal essays, this is MLA format. So, and I want you to practice it. So, yeah, so for your first draft and your second draft, I want you to follow that format as closely as possible. Does anyone have any questions about the format right now? Any questions about how I would like you to format it? Okay, so Ricky, he has no question. Do we all understand? The only thing for the final, this is only for the final, no. I would like you to do this for the first draft. Sydney, I would like you to, yeah, put your, as I said, you know, your name here, professor name, class, dates, title. I would like that for every single draft you write. When is the original due? It's due next week, Friday. It's due next week, Friday.
Professor, I didn't mean the draft, the original form of it.
The draft.
Yes, the draft due next week. When is the finished form, finished rate?
You know, let me take a look at my syllabus. I think it's due, hold on, give me a second while I find my syllabus. I think it's due either the week after that or 2 weeks after that. I think it's due 2 weeks after that. Yeah, it would be due on October 1st. Yeah, October 1st. Right? If you go to the syllabus and you see week 6, personal narrative revision due. Yeah, so it's due on October 1st. Does anyone have questions about like what I would like them to write about? Are we all on the same page about that? Yes, right? I know one student already asked this question and she was like, well, I can't think of a moment from school that had a like a happy moment from school or a bad moment for school or sad moment from school. And so she would like to write about something else. And that's okay, that's fine. But yeah, that's really the point of this first. I mean, that's what I would like you guys to write for this essay. Either your favorite moment from school or your worst memory from school. And again, I don't want really just a straightforward story of on September 1st of my of kindergarten. I ate, you know, macaroni and cheese and played kickball. No, I want more focus on why that's such a happy or sad memory for you. The why factor, you know, because I think based on whatever it might be, it could actually lead to a bigger discussion, depending on what it is, that you might expand to an even longer essay later on. But again, I want the focus to be on the why instead of just, again, you telling me about a happy day. Okay. So are there any more questions, or are we all good now? I mean, no questions. Anyone else? All good. Okay, so by the way, before I say goodbye and happy weekend to everyone, you know, earlier this week, I mean, I was told last week that, it's up to us whether, like the professor, whether we want an in-person class or not. And I did want an in-person class because I feel like teaching to you guys in person is actually better than me teaching you through a computer, honestly. It is better to teach to you guys in person than doing it through a computer. So that's why, and I didn't want to force anyone though to show up to class if they weren't comfortable yet. But you know what, Steve? So that's why I asked the question. And originally I only received a few responses, and I'm saying to myself, do we just not care? Like, do we not care?
It's 4:30.
So I was like, come on, people, give me an answer, somebody. And so, I think most of you said that we should wait till next week. So, so then I made the decision, okay, online class for this week. And what's the ironic part though? At about 1:30 yesterday, I was actually told that my students, not enough of my students haven't been vaccinated yet. So you can't have an online class. I mean, you can't have an in-person class. So this class was going to be online no matter what. Surprisingly, plot twist. Yeah. And I mean, I came to the decision of having online anyway before I was even told this. So all the way up until 1:30 yesterday, I thought it was my choice to be in person or not. And then it turned out, no, for this week, you have to be online anyway, like no matter what, So sorry for that. Sorry for sounding a little agitated in my emails. This class does intended to be in person eventually. And the plan is still the same. The plan is that next week, we're going to plan for it to be in person. However, and keep this in mind, it's very possible that I might get another plot twist, don't show up. And obviously, I will let you know if that is the case. But it is very possible that even though right now we plan to be in person next week, it is possible that we might have to do it online again. And I know that kind of sucks. But that's just the reality of our situation. So it's almost like a week by week thing at this point, which is really annoying. But it's what we have to do at this point, because there's just still so many unknowns about could we practice social distancing or not, Either way, if we do meet in person, eventually everyone has to wear a mask, even if you're vaccinated, you have to wear a mask. All right, anyway. So during the week, look out for responses to your letters, because I will be responding to every single letter. And whether we're going to meet in person or not, complete the first draft of your first formal essay. Post a letter to your parents if you haven't done so yet. There is another reading for next week. Hold on, let me get my syllabus out for you guys. Next week's reading is Bell Hooks's Learning in the Shadow of Race and Class. Before we meet, make sure you read that essay. Bell Hooks's Learning in the Shadow of Race and Class. And yeah, are you grading the letters? Interesting question. When it comes to informal writing assignments, I won't actually provide like a letter grade. I'll just have like a comment about what you wrote. So like all the informal writing assignments, they will equal like 1 grade. So let's say you were you consistently wrote all your writing your informal writing assignments, and you tried to write something actually, good and not just like, let's say, a paragraph. Then that could equal, let's say, an A when it comes to the 10% of your overall grade. And if you do only half of your informal writing assignments, that might be a C or D, et cetera, et cetera. So in other words, there won't be a grade for each and every single informal writing assignment, but there will be a comment written by me. Does that make sense? No? Yes? Yes, that makes sense. Okay.
So not every single one will be graded, you're trying to say?
Well, they will equal one, like there won't be a grade next to every single one, if that makes sense. But they will equal like an overall grade. Like I'll take them all, right? And then that will contribute to 1 grade. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. Yeah, I mean, in other words, not every single one of them you're going to see an A or B or whatever. But if you do them all, the more you do, the better it'll contribute to your overall grade. Because that requirement for the class, those assignments, they equal 10% of your overall average. So let's say you don't do any of them. That 10%, if you let's say you write 3 amazing formal essays, but you don't do any informal writing assignments, that's going to have an effect on your grade, overall grade. I mean, again, I'm still not sure if I'm making sense, but in other words, there won't be like, some of them might even just have like a check mark, and comments along with a check mark saying, okay, you did it, good job. Yeah, anyway, are there any more questions? No? If you don't have any questions, let me know. I mean, if you have any questions, you could obviously email me before class. If you want to have a Zoom meeting, just one-on-one, we could do that too, right? But I think, I think we've been here for about 2 hours, so I think it's a good time to let everyone enjoy their weekend. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. If you're not sure where to post your letter or the first draft of your essay, ask me and I will try to point you in the right direction. Yeah, if you're having any other issues, email me at any time and I will answer you. I may not answer you immediately, but I will answer you. Okay, are we all good? Yep, okay. Enjoy your weekend. Okay, yes. I want to hear 2 more say yes. Okay, thank you. I'll take that. Okay, good. All right, goodbye, everyone. Have a nice weekend. Thank you for coming. Hopefully next week I'll see half of your faces. Or I see you back here. Okay,
All right. Have a nice weekend.
thanks, you too.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you, you too.
Professor,
Yes.
I completely forgot about the assignment that we had to do this week. So I'm gonna complete it, hopefully finish it by tonight. What was the about the grading system? Like if we turn in something late, you take points off each day it's late.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is especially true when it comes to like the personal narrative, the formal essay, for example. When it comes to these informal writing assignments, like the letter, for example, I certainly would want you to submit those on time. But, I think I really just would like you to get it done and then not worry about how lateness will affect it per se for the informal writing assignments. But, I'll give you a mulligan, because, we had the hurricane, we had, et cetera, et cetera. But, for the future, try to keep up with them.
Okay, thank you, because I forgot about this and I ended up doing the personal narrative, and so I submitted that thinking that was the assignment we were supposed to do this week.
Okay. Well, just get it done. And then, for the future, try to, stay on track as much as you could.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you. You too.